right, how we doing, community? Wow, I like it. And I want to say a special welcome again to our digital audience, our growing digital audience that joins us online. And we are full blown into Christmas season, aren't we? I mean, I like it. I love Christmas. I love the sights of, trees and houses decorated, the smell, right? Who doesn't love the smell of a Christmas cookie? Are you with me? Yes. And Christmas actually even has its own unique kind of sounds. I mean, when else, other than at Christmas time, do you hear like this? I mean, it feels like Santa's right around the corner, doesn't it? Either that or the Salvation Army. I know one of those two, right? and who doesn't love, kind of the warm winter sounds of Christmas music?
Chestnuts roasting on an open fire.
Go ahead and sing it if you know it. Here we go.
Jack Frost nipping at your nose.
Oh, wow, that was pretty good. Very nice. And of course, no sound actually captures the coming Christmas season like this. Somehow, I don't know how it happened, but I'm told that this year between Thanksgiving and Christmas Day, we lost like 6 days. It's like 6 days less than other years. It seems like a calendar ought to be the same, but that's what they tell me, right? And here's what I want to do this morning. I want to just pause kind of in this Christmas season. I want to just kind of keep this very real. All right, we want, and I mean I do, because I'm kind of a little bit of a Christmas junkie. I want it to feel like sleigh bells ringing. I want it to feel like chestnuts roasting. But oftentimes it does. It feels like uncertainty. It feels like worry. It feels like hurry. It feels like anxiousness. And I think for many of us this Christmas season, while we want those things, oftentimes we kind of get the Jaws theme song. Am I right? And I know I've been there. Where, there's the extra preparation that has to go into Christmas, right? And I get away with saying that because my wife's not here. She'd be like, extra preparation for you, really? I do a little bit of extra. She does a lot, okay? There's also the difficult relationships. Let's be honest, right? There's some people you can kind of avoid and some of them are family members the rest of the year. But it's kind of like full on. They're right in your face and you got to deal with it. And then there's kind of the way the holidays, I don't know exactly what it is, but they accentuate pain. There's stuff from the past that's kind of like, oh, it's another year since. And it just kind of reminds us. And of course, then there's the anxiety and uncertainty that we already feel. And for some of us, you showed up in this place and you got uncertainty, not just about Christmas, but about your job, what your future holds work-wise. You're feeling anxious about your kids, because they're becoming more and more independent, and you worry about the choices they're going to make and are making. Your finances, they bring you anxiety. You're hoping you have enough, and certainly enough maybe just to get through this Christmas or even to cover the bills that you know you're going to spend anyway. And let me just say this, okay? If that's you, where there is some uncertainty, or even some anxiousness, some anxiety, some fear, I want to talk specifically to you. I want everybody to kind of listen in, but I want to talk specifically to you. And here's my hope. My hope is that before the time we're done, before you walk back out those doors, that you're going to leave in the middle of any kind of doubt, fear, uncertainty, or anxiousness, and you're going to know there is a reason for you to have faith. There's a reason for you to have hope, and there's a reason you do not have to give up. Here's the deal. We're in a series called BC, which stands for Before Christmas. And I heard a few people last week kind of whispering, going like, do they know BC doesn't really stand for Before Christmas? Okay, yeah, we know that, okay? But it's kind of just a clever way. It's our clever way of talking about the prophets, because the prophets actually spoke about Christ, okay, before Christmas. And so we're talking about the prophets. And the prophets are these special messengers that God would send, people like Micah or Jeremiah or Malachi. But today we're going to take a look at a guy by the name of Isaiah. Just say that after me so it sinks in. Isaiah. We're going to talk about Isaiah. And Isaiah is this unique guy because he's one of the prophets. And what God would do is he would speak through these prophets at specific times, in specific places, with a very specific message that would give them wisdom, instructions, or maybe warning to God's people. And the reason these were such important things because it was actually God was speaking through them. But what we see in the Old Testament over and over and over again is lots of times they would ignore it or dismiss it or not pay real close attention to it. And the results, when they wouldn't pay close attention to what God was saying to them, was just disastrous. So let me give you a little bit of context here to Isaiah to kind of set the story here. This was after the reign of Solomon. So you had the first king of Israel there was Saul, and then there was David, and there was Solomon. And now the nation of Israel is actually split into two parts. The northern kingdom has actually been captured by the Assyrian army. Some years later, not yet, the southern kingdom would fall to the Babylonians. But in the middle of all this chaos, comes our guy Isaiah. And today I have a young friend who's going to help you understand in very simple terms kind of some of Isaiah's story. Here we go.
Twas 1,000 years before Christmas, around 930 BC, Israel split into two kingdoms, led mostly by bad kings. So God sent the prophets to speak words that were true, but nobody listened, and the kingdoms fell through. From Jerusalem came a prophet, Isaiah was his name, who watched the north crumble and thought, "What a shame!" And then came the day his king Uzziah died. Uncertainty filled the land, and the anxious people cried. But even in the middle of this very scary place, God spoke through Isaiah and gave him reason for his faith.
So there you go. Now, when we pick up Isaiah, we're going to pick up in the Old Testament, the book named after him, Isaiah, and in chapter 6, verse 1. And here's how it begins. It begins with this word, this phrase right here, in the year that King Uzziah died. Now, anybody who's kind of reading the Old Testament, reading Isaiah, you probably just fly right past that, but we really need to pause. We need to pause there because what happens right there is very, very, very important. Because this king, King Uzziah, was a very, very popular king. He actually reigned for, imagine this, 50 years. 50 years, and with every decade, his fame and his popularity seemed to grow. And part of the reason is because this guy did a great job. I mean, they were very prosperous. Not only were they prosperous, but he was just a great leader. He would fight against political corruption. He would call out kind of hypocrisy amongst religious leaders. I mean, under Big U, things were really good. Things were really, really good. But Uzziah dies. And so when he passes away, it throws all the people in that country into tremendous uncertainty. And they all begin to wonder, what now? What next? And I think it's hard for us to actually grasp what they were feeling because, I mean, we're not used to a king. We don't know what it's like, and especially one that a whole lifetime, like 50 years. And I think some of this anxiety actually got exacerbated because, remember, the northern kingdom had already been captured by the Assyrians, and now the southern kingdom didn't have a king, and it made them very, 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 very vulnerable. And so here's what happens. Uncertainty often opens the door, and then in walks anxiety. That happens with us, but it also happens with them. Uncertainty, right, in our lives opens the door, and then in walks anxiety. Now, to help you kind of get a grasp on how they felt after Uzziah died, I want you to think about this. I think there's been times in our own country when it's been true for us. I could simply, I think, mention a date, and you would immediately, almost immediately, begin to at least feel part of what they were feeling. Let me give you this date. September 11th, 2001. It's been called the defining event for a generation of Americans. Now, for any of us that are probably at least in our early or mid-20s, we probably are older or remember exactly where we were on that date. And I'll tell you what, if you do remember that, let's just take 30 seconds. This might be good for us. Let's just take 30 seconds, 15 seconds each. Turn to a person near you and go like, oh, this is what I was going on. This is where I was when that happened. Do you remember? Go ahead and turn to the person next to you. Just tell them, here's where I was. Here's what was going on. I'll tell you what, for me, and for some of you, maybe, because we have a whole bunch of folks in here that are under 25. If you don't remember, let me tell you where I was. I know it was a Tuesday morning. It was a Tuesday morning, and there was a whole group of pastors who were getting ready to fly into Chicago and meet here at the Yellow Box, a large number of pastors. And it was actually before we had this part of the building or the other part of the building, just the middle part. And I had gone over on the other side of Naperville to the Panera over there, over on Ogden Avenue. And I was over at the Panera over there, and I was kind of having breakfast with myself and also kind of finishing up a presentation I was supposed to do. I finished it up, left Panera, got in my car, and as I got in my car to drive here to the Yellow Box, I turned the radio on, and in a matter of a moment, it felt like the whole world was literally up for grabs. I mean, that uncertainty I was talking about, you remember it, or if you don't remember, let me tell you, it was immediate. And here's the thing. For months, and some of you will remember this too. You remember the feeling like when an airplane would fly over? You'd find yourself kind of flinching just a little bit. You'd find yourself kind of just doing a double take. And the whole world wondered what would happen next. See, you've also had some of those moments personally, haven't you? Where there were circumstances that irreversibly altered your life. Might be a divorce, might be a death, might be a betrayal of a friend. You had events that opened the door of uncertainty, the loss of a job. You've had times that left you wondering, okay, what now? And I could ask you, and we'd all have our own stories, and you could tell me exactly where you were. I'm not old enough to remember this, but I wonder if when King Uzziah died for Isaiah and the people of the southern kingdom, if it wasn't similar to what many felt after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. Again, one of those kind of moments in time where it left everybody wondering, what next? And I want you to feel that. You feel that just a little bit? I want you to feel that, because if you can feel that, that's exactly how they felt in this moment. Everything was thrown into uncertainty. And in the middle of this uncertainty and wondering what now, what next, all kinds of questions, Isaiah has a vision. And here's his vision back in chapter 6. It starts with, in the year that King Uzziah died, in the middle of all this chaos, in the middle of this uncertainty, in the middle of doubt and wonder, what now? He said this, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne. He sees a king. What does he see? Help me out. Got a little bit more. He sees a what? Exactly right. He sees a king, and he says the train of the robe filled the temple. And above him were seraphim, angels, each with 6 wings. 2 wings that they covered their faces, 2 wings that they covered their feet, 2 that they were flying with. And then they were all calling to one another, holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty, and the whole earth is full of his glory. And in the midst of all this wonder of what are they going to do without their king, God gives Isaiah this powerful reminder, hey, listen, coming is another king. And this king that's coming is never going to die. This king, his glory is going to actually fill the whole earth. This is king who will have a kingdom that will never end. And now Isaiah not only receives this vision of this king on a throne, but he also saw a king in a cradle. And here's what he says. Look at this in the next chapter. We flip over to the next chapter in Isaiah 7. He says, therefore the Lord himself will give this sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, God with us. Isaiah is saying, listen, I know there's doubt, I know there's concern, there's fear, there's anxiety, but listen, a king is coming to be with us, and he's coming in the most unusual way. He's going to be born of a virgin. Okay, who is that king? Very good. That's exactly right. And so when all of a sudden now we jump over to the New Testament in the Gospels, the first writer, Matthew, he actually puts down some of the words of Isaiah's prophecy. And then we pick that up, and here's what he says next. He says, all this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet Isaiah, that the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they'll call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. It's now been 700 years since Uzziah died, since Isaiah prophesied those prophetic words. Why God sometimes makes us wait so long, I don't know. But the good news is this, Isaiah's prophecy came true. He was born of a virgin, and the king's name is Jesus. And here's one of the things I want you to get early on. Into a world of chaos, into a world of uncertainty, Jesus comes as a powerful, righteous, eternal king. And he comes exactly like Isaiah prophesied. Go back to Isaiah real quick here, and look what he said in Isaiah 9. He says, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government, this king, will be on his shoulders. And here's who he'll be. He'll be a wonderful counselor. He'll be a mighty God, an everlasting Father, a Prince of Peace. And the greatness of his government and his peace, there will be no end." The king the people of God had been waiting for since the days of Isaiah had finally arrived. And I kind of love thinking about that baby then coming as a king and then growing into a man, and all of them who anticipated this coming king that Isaiah talked about, getting to watch him at work. All the amazing wonders, healing the sick, feeding the masses, raising the dead. I mean, this guy, he seemed unstoppable. So finally, someone who could make everything that was wrong was going to make it right. The days of uncertainty are over. The king, right? They've been prophesied, this king had come. It was unthinkable that any of this could be interrupted. But then the darkness pushed back against the light. Chaos returned. And this long-awaited king who came as a baby and now as a man stood trial before Pilate, with the Roman government accusing him. Pilate, ironically, accusing him of being a king. The fourth gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. John records this conversation that took place between Pilate and Jesus. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, "Come on inside here." And he said, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus responds, is that your own idea, or did others talk to you about me? Pilate replies, "Am I a Jew? Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it that you've done?" And then Jesus says, "Listen, my kingdom," he's talking to Pilate, "my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now, my kingdom is from another place." And then Pilate kind of ends the conversation. He says, "Oh, you are a king then." And so for Jesus' followers, their worst fears were being realized. The uncertainty that followed Uzziah's death was nothing compared to this. Everything they'd hoped for, everything they believed about Jesus was crashing down in front of them at this trial. This King of Kings was standing trial, beaten and humiliated by Pilate, a pawn in the hands of local kind of religious leaders. So now he's being handed off to go be crucified. And so the gospel writer John records what happened next. He says the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and they put it on his head. Remember this part? They clothed him in a purple robe. And they went up to him again and again, mocking him, right? Found guilty for being a king, mocking him, saying, "Oh, hail, King of the Jews!" And then they slapped him in the face. And away he went to be crucified. It's another one of those uncertain moments. It's another one of those moments of doubt and uncertainty. Now, here's my hope, okay? I want you to get this. Here's my hope for you, okay? And for me, for all of us, is that even in your most chaotic and uncertain moments, even in the most chaotic and uncertain moments of your life or in history, there's always a reason for faith and for hope and not to give up. As our teaching team was working on this talk, we discovered something, really interesting that I did not know prior to this. In the historical writings of the Gospels, lean in on this, I want you to catch this. In the historical writings of the Gospels, they all of them, every one of the Gospel writers use a peculiar word to describe this crown of thorns that was placed on Jesus' head. Now, there's two different, actually, Greek words they could choose from to describe this crown of thorns that actually translate crown. One of the words they could have used was diadem. A diadem is this idea of a king's crown, right? A king's crown. Maybe you remember if you went to church as a kid, the old hymn, "Bring forth the royal," anybody? Okay, you don't know that. Maybe it's just my singing too. I don't know. But it goes, bring forth the royal diadem and crown him Lord of all. And what it's talking about, diadem is a king's crown. And it would make sense that they would use that word because it is a king's crown, and they're mocking him with that. But the gospel writers don't use that word when they refer to this was placed upon Jesus' head. Instead, they use this word, the word Stephanos. And Stephanos is not a word you would use to refer to a twisted crown of thorns, because Stephanos was a twisted crown of, check this out, it's actually laurel and ivy. A crown of twisted laurel and ivy. Does that ring a bell? Somebody got it. Could be Caesar, yes, but even specifically, it refers to someone who was a winner in the Greek games. It was actually someone like an Olympian winner. And so they choose instead, because they know what's going down, that even though in the worst of times it appears as though he's headed to death, that he actually, as he's marching to death, right, the walking dead, he's actually walking with a victor's crown. A victor's crown. And so I want you to picture this, okay? And what looks and sounds like utter defeat for Jesus, who's been led away to be crucified, it seems, okay? It seems as though his life is being taken from him, that his kingdom is being brought to an abrupt end. What is gracing his brow then is actually a victor's crown. It's a foreshadowing. And the very symbol there that's meant to mock him is actually, and I love this, a reminder to you and me of ultimate victory that we have in Christ. Amen. That's what I wanted to hear. Can I get another amen? That's the good news. And here's the thing. That's the reason. That's the reason for our faith, for our hope, and not to give up. Yes, this Christmas season, but every day. Because here's the good news. In the center of the most chaotic scene in all of human history stands a king who is wearing a victor's crown as a reminder that just 3 days later, he would overcome life's ultimate blow, death itself. And here's the thing. Let's bring it home to you and me, okay? We're no strangers to uncertainty. And maybe the Jaws soundtrack, that's not just this Christmas, that's been the last couple of years. Some of us, we carry a free-floating kind of fear that something bad is always around the corner, and it just haunts us. Some of us have a very specific kind of anxiousness about our finances or our career or our relationship that we so value. I mean, for me personally, I would say it seems like my worries grow with the age of my kids. And it does. It seems like only yesterday I had 3 little people. I wanted them to get good grades, make good friends, and eat their vegetables. And I didn't really care about the vegetables. That was actually Sue. I don't even like vegetables. But you know what? Now they're in their 20s, and I find myself anxious about their career choices, about future spouses, about their choices they're going to make, about spiritual things. And this whole thing of being a parent is to decide forever to like have your heart go walking around outside your body. And my kids would hate to hear me talking about this, but I mean, if you have kids or kids you're close to, you know what I'm talking about. You never stop parenting, you never stop thinking about them, and you pray for them every day. What is it for you? What is it for you? Whatever it is for you, know this. When life feels uncertain and scary, we do not have to fear because Jesus is our King. He is in control. And he's saying to you and me, he's saying, listen to this, please hear this. I want you to get this imagery. He said, even as I carried the cross, I was actually wearing a crown of victory. He was saying, even though that tomb was sealed, right, and shut, I knew I was going to be able to push back that stone and open up the door. And for you, in the middle of your anxiety, in the middle of your uncertainty, in the middle of your fear, what I want to do, Jesus says, is I want to place my spirit, my victorious spirit inside you, okay? And I make this promise to you, and here it is, that I will never fail you and I will never abandon you. Amen. You can trust me. There's a classic book, and this goes back several years, called The Hiding Place. It's now sold 3 million copies. It's just an amazing, amazing faith-filled story by a woman named Corrie ten Boom. If you're not familiar with the story, Corrie ten Boom, she was just this very simple Dutch watchmaker in pre-World War II Holland. And I don't know how else to say it except she just lived a very kind of uneventful, somewhat kind of just boring kind of life that got disrupted by the Nazis. It was one of those tremendous eras of uncertainty and anxiousness. Because she was a believer and felt prompted by God, Corrie ten Boom makes the choice to protect and hide Jews in her home from the Nazis. Eventually, she's found out and she's arrested and sent to a Nazi concentration camp. And there in that Nazi concentration camp, she experiences and sees things that are just almost unmentionable and unthinkable. But it was there that she also wrote these words. It's just a brilliant metaphor for, I think, for those of us that are going through times of doubt and worry and anxiousness. Here's what she said. Imagine being in that concentration camp. Here's what she said. She said, you know, when a train goes through a tunnel and it gets dark, you don't throw away the ticket and jump off. You sit still and you trust the engineer. When a train goes through a tunnel and it gets dark, you don't throw away the ticket and jump off. No, you sit still and you trust the engineer. I don't know what worries, I don't know specifically what concerns, what sources of anxiety you brought with you this morning. And I don't have a quick fix, but what if we did just that? What if we did just that? In the midst of what might feel like for you a dark tunnel, what if we said, you know what? I'm going to sit still and I'm going to trust. I'm going to trust. I want to lead us in a moment of just sitting still and trusting. I'm going to ask you, would just go ahead and bow your head. And if you would, go ahead. It's just you and the King. Bring to mind right now those things that are worrisome for you. Those things that bring uncertainty. Those things that make your heart beat a little too fast, that make you anxious. Go ahead and just acknowledge the darkness of the tunnel, whatever that may be for you today. Now, in the midst of that uncertainty, God brought you here today to tell you that there's reason to not give up. There's reason for hope and there's reason for faith because your King is here in the middle of it all. And for some of you right now, I believe he's going to actually speak in your thoughts. Listen to him. He wants to bring images to mind in your imagination. And he wants you to feel right now his presence and him saying, I will never leave you. I will never abandon you. As you go through this dark tunnel, trust him. Trust him. Say these words after me out loud. Jesus, I lay down all my worry, all my uncertainty before you. I recognize that you are my king in the middle of chaos. And I have faith in your victory. Amen.